Hello and welcome to the NBA DFS on the RotoRadar podcast. My name is Joshua Riemer, joined by none other than the man, the myth, the legend on my right, Jared Block. Jared, it is a fine Monday afternoon, doing it an hour earlier than we usually do it, or we have done it so far this season. Trying to get some compatibility issues. We had some complaints about some people not being able to watch the stream full on Twitter. So now, while we are live here, we are also live on audio platforms. That's pretty exciting.
It is. Look at us figuring out some technical difficulties and actually doing
Yeah.
it. So we have NBA to talk about. Lots of games on this fine Monday. Josh, how was your first weekend of the NBA season?
Oh man, I hate your Bucks, man. I hate Dame.
Yeah,
I can
same.
officially say I not only did we lose on the FanDuel side of things, mostly because of Dame, just a putrid performance. I lost a parlay on Dame. I lost a prize picks bet on Dame. It was a tough night to be a Dame backer and to see him come up so short. We'll see if that changes against the Miami Heat tonight. But I was not thrilled about Dame. Saturday was very good to us, but Damian Lillard, man, the bane of my existence, at least early on in the NBA season.
Yeah, Saturday was very good to us. We keep it taking advantage of lots of Sixers games, and so that was really fun to sweat out there. And some of that stuff was just fine. Sunday, I mean, I don't really know what to say other than the Bucks team is just going to go through some ebbs and flows of some stuff. So that is what happened on Sunday, and they just completely didn't show up. We'll see if they take it a little bit more seriously tonight against the Miami Heat, who eliminated them last year. So that's kind of why I think maybe that got away from us yesterday. But again, Atlanta is not this super power talent, so I don't know. I think the same Bucks things potentially do apply, meaning we'll talk about the whole allowing the 3-pointer stuff, but yeah, that was kind of just a disappointment last night. Not too many injuries on the slate as of right now. Zach LaVine and Bam Adebayo seem to be the only things that really stand out outside of a few guys that have already been ruled out. So we do have a slate that has a lot of superstar talent on it and 11 games to talk about.
Yes, sir. Exactly. All right. I think without further ado, we can get into this thing, right?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, let's do it. First game up on the board is going to be the Bulls facing off against the Pacers. Pacers come in as 3-point favorites, over under at 229.5. Let's talk about this Bulls team first. I don't think anyone was expecting on Saturday for that Zach LaVine performance to be Zach LaVine. I mean, that's the first time the Bulls have had a 50-point scorer in quite a long time. And LaVine was that guy that night. I mean, I don't think, obviously at his price tag of 7,000, 54 FanDuel points looks very good. He also looks very scoring dependent to start out the season. If he doesn't get
Yep.
that scoring going, then not much else is going to work out for him. So give me your thoughts on the Zach LaVine performance. He's probable today due to this same back injury. I think we're assuming he plays through it because it didn't cause him that many problems overall, and it didn't cause him that many problems on Saturday either.
Right. Well, I mean, it's classic Bulls fashion where they call a team meeting, players only meeting, and then Zach LaVine says, "My back hurts," and then he goes out and scores 50 points. So that's a pretty Zach LaVine thing to do. I think that people, like I've mentioned the past couple podcasts here, people are looking for price specific players that are just not, the price tags just are not caught up there. And it does feel like LaVine is in that category. And we obviously know that any Indiana game is going to feature a lot of points and a lot of run and gun type of situations. I think that some Chicago players are fine. I kind of wanted to try to take the approach of staying away from something like this, where a team is kind of healthy, but at the same time, we get a lot of that today. So I think we're just going to have to play spots maybe that might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but the price adjusted pieces of this are going to make the FanDuel and DraftKings side of things at least.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think about this overall for DFS? Is there anyone that sticks off the page for you in terms of how they should perform here against this Pacers team that's been incredibly high scoring to start of the season? We'll talk about
Right.
that on the other side, but Pacers
Right.
have been getting it done recently.
Yeah, they have. I would be curious to see what we get at the point guard position for the Bulls. Saw we rostered Kobe White once already to start the year. Um, and we also, or yeah, not Kobe White, right? Like he's
No, Kobe White.
I'm
We used
still
to we
getting
watched Kobe White on like opening night or Wednesday night. It might be.
right. And then he ended up being chalk on Saturday and underperformed, I believe. If I get my days right, yeah, two FanDuel points against Detroit. So that's where I'd want to start the conversation to try to get something right there, because those guys are trying to figure out that role, and those guys are cheap over on FanDuel. On FanDuel as well, DeMar DeRozan comes in at 8K. Again, not something I really want to discuss necessarily, but it feels like he's a touch too low. So I kind of just like I do want to have some kind of Chicago piece here. I do think like that what the spread says and them being 3-point underdogs, it does feel like Zach LaVine's going to give it a go and just play through this thing. So I don't know, man. One of those two guys are fine. I'm not willing to go to Vooch in the Miles Turner spot. I think that one of these Levine or DeRozan's potentially are in play here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Levine did really well against this team last year. 249 FanDuel point performances, both where he scored a ridiculous amount of points. Also got help from rebounds and assists, which I'm not sure necessarily come to him in this game, but
Yeah.
he scored 35, 42, 28, and then 14 against this team last year in terms of point scoring. If he's anywhere near that, then I think you have to have interest here against a Pacers team that seems to be running really fast pace with Tyrese Halliburton, and all that stuff happened after this team, got some key additions. So I think this could be a spot that he just ends up dominating. I wouldn't be that shocked.
Not something that I'm super thrilled with saying, Josh, but it maybe does apply into the pick'em side of things where I don't really want Vooch as a point scorer or rebounder today with Miles Turner on the other side, but it does feel like he does get there in assists. So I'll talk about that when we get there. And it would make sense in fading the other categories to try to do that. So I don't know. I think Levine is fine. Trying to depend on anything else besides point scoring is going to be difficult, but there might be enough possessions in here to make that worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely like the Levine spot. I can certainly get behind it, especially since doesn't seem like they increased his price tag all that much, considering the performance on Monday night or on Saturday night, excuse me. But yeah, like the Levine
Yeah.
spot. Anything else you like secondary piece wise? I think with them running this Pacers team running so fast paced now, I wouldn't mind going to a Caruso type play. I don't know what his minutes are necessarily going to look like. I think that, especially with Kobe White falling off in the last performance, you could see more Caruso minutes. And if that's the case, we saw 4 steals from him. He's a consistent steal guy, so I'm willing to bank on that category. And if that's the case, he's going to pay off this $4,700 price tag more than he doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, so do we just call the Kobe White spot just a one time thing, a dud for that purpose? Because kind of be willing to go back to that potentially if we knew that he was going to be just playing the same amount of minutes and doing the same thing with that group. I don't know. I think maybe a lot of that was just for like, that was a benefit to why Levine put up 50, right? So rarely are you going to see Kobe White go 27 minutes of scoreless basketball uh, and no peripherals at all. So I'd kind of be willing to go to one of these point guards if it makes sense.
Yeah, I certainly don't mind going to one of these point guards. I think if I'm going to go to one, it's going to be the Caruso one. I feel like with Caruso having those steals in his back pocket, it kind of feels like a spot where it's almost similar to a quarterback with a who has rushing ability. Like it's almost like a floor that you get built into a player. And if Caruso's going to have those steals, especially in such a fast-paced game, I think that taking the chance is definitely
Yeah.
viable.
More possessions, faster pace equals more turnover opportunities. So I can buy into that as well. Let's talk Pacers though, and talk this side of the ball. We've seen, any game that they've been in has been just insanely high scoring, like we've mentioned several times already. But it does feel like Tyrese Halliburton is nearing the peak of his price tags. 2 games so far this year, getting close to the 50 FanDuel point range. Does feel like he has an accurate price tag today. And we know that if they put a little bit more attention on stopping that decision with Caruso and with a few other guys that maybe he doesn't or is not able to live up to the hype 3 games in a row here. Anything else stand out for you from this angle? I don't really necessarily see anything that jumps off the page.
Yeah, neither do I. I think that guys like Benedict Mathurin and Bruce Brown are okay options, but minutes floor feels iffy with Benedict Mathurin. It seems like they're kind of switching him in and out with Buddy Hield, and it just it's a tough spot to attack if you're not going to Tyrese Halliburton, which is I I agree with you in the fact that his price tag's probably a little bit too high at this point at 9,600. You need 50 plus. I feel like 50 plus is, I wouldn't say his ceiling. He hasn't necessarily shown us that like 30-point performance with 10 plus assists, and that's probably pretty close to what his ceiling can be. But tough defense with Caruso on him, at least for a majority or a partial of the game. And I don't know. I can't really get behind much. It feels like you should because it's a healthy total. It's two teams that are running relatively fast pace this season, especially the Pacers. And to score that many points against to score 125 points against a Cavs team that's very sound defensively is impressive. It's just hard to get there.
Right. Again, I mean, like we've spent the majority of the first week of the NBA season reacting to injuries that have come in and injuries that are currently existing. You don't really get that in this game, even though it is enticing. So we are still trying to find teams that are injured, and there will be some on this slate. But it is kind of weird that we don't have anything on this Pacers side to talk about much.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit frustrating because it does feel like you should be taking something, but nothing
Well,
jumps off
yeah, I
the
mean,
page.
third highest team total on the slate. So
Yeah, no, I mean it looks solid. It's just like the only piece I want is Tyrese, and the only piece that I think you aren't able to get to price tag wise is Tyrese. So and all their minutes have been so fluctuating. You know, Obi Toppin played 20 in the first game and then 10 in the next. Aaron Naismith played 30 in the last game and then played 20 minutes in the first game. And basically the only minutes
right,
that I think you can really count on here is Miles Turner and Tyrese Halliburton. And I don't think Turner should be taking up your center spot today, but yeah, it's a tough situation to go through with this individual matchup. All right, let's talk about pick'em stuff, Jared. Anything jump off the page to you? While we're not able to afford the price tag of Tyrese Halliburton, I am willing to take some props on him. I don't mind going 10.5 assists. I don't mind going points. And in fact, they have a combo over on prize picks with Halliburton and Levine over 46.5 points. I don't think that's a bad option. I think you're banking on Levine getting 30 and Halliburton getting 20. And I think that's pretty sound.
right. So this has been something where I'm trying to keep an eye on the assist stuff for Halliburton. Cleared in 2 out of 3 matchups that he played in last season against Chicago. This year, in the 2 games they've played, one of them being a run and gun with Washington that I believe got away from the Washington Wizards, and then the second one against Cleveland, tough matchup. He's been able to clear the 10.5 assist number. So currently 2 for 2. It looks like this one's going to be also pretty solid. If for any reason he is limited from a scoring perspective, or if they put more attention on that, then I do think that the assists are in play there. So I don't mind the assist. I think that that's fine. That would be where I would probably stop with the Pacers side of things. But yeah, I agree that that combo is okay.
All right. Anything else on the pick'em side of things? If not, let's move on to this next game.
Yeah, some kind of similar in terms of what I talked about the Vooch stuff, and I think that potentially where he could be a little bit more involved would be getting those assists, and you never really take Vooch to be an assist guy. I don't really think it necessarily is anywhere near a top 10 play on the board today, but he did clear this in every single game against the Pacers last year. It's a pace up spot for this team. Where I'd start to feel a little bit iffy is like, how many games in 4 nights has this Bulls team played? And then at the same time, like, do you really trust Vooch to be able to connect on some assists? The line's low at 2.5, and he cleared every single time against the Pacers, but that would be the play I would have from the Bulls.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to this next game, which is going to be the Brooklyn Nets facing off against the Charlotte Hornets. Currently, the Hornets 1 point underdogs at home. Over under is at 227. Let's talk about this Nets side first. Was some encouraging things, some not so encouraging things against the Mavs that we have to point out. Spencer Dinwiddie did very well. Mikal Bridges kind of fell short of what we were expecting from him, to be honest. But we saw, you can take your victory lap because I kind of shit on you for it, and he ended up doing very well. Ben Simmons was your guy on Friday, and we saw him do really well. 10 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 blocks and steals, and 44 FanDuel points to go along with it. I feel like he's the spot that you start out with because you still have Cam Johnson out for this game. You still have Nick Claxton out for this game. How interested are you in Ben Simmons for today's slate?
Yeah, talking a lot about Simmons because of the injuries, and that's why we need to talk and start that out today. Like I think he is in a spot where you're able to kind of place him wherever you want him to be in terms of positional, eligibility there. So with two guys out, and I'm not saying Cam Johnson's like a insane rebounder by any means, but having Claxton out by himself would have put me on this play again. And what I saw that was really encouraging was that they basically Brooklyn just said, "Hey, we're going to give you as many minutes as you can handle. Go out there and put up all the peripheral stats and just be any points that come along with it are great, but just do a little bit of everything else." And they're going to have to do that again tonight in this spot. And we know that we were enticed because Dallas's interior defense was awful, but he was still able to hit this against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I think that tonight I'm not scared of Mark Williams. PJ Washington, I guess a little bit, but I still think that Ben Simmons is going to be a guy that crashes the boards with no Nick Claxton, and then just having no Cam Johnson is just one, security for minutes, and two, just more ample opportunities for Ben Simmons to be around the rim.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think there's any big rebounder on this Charlotte team that is necessarily going to keep him out of the paint. I think he's going to continue to be a really good rebounder. I think he's going to continue to be a really good passer, and um, hopefully you get a really good scoring output from him. And if that's the case, then you could really see him have pretty big fantasy lines. So I like the Ben Simmons spot a lot. I think it's very
Yeah.
solid. I think there's other spots on this team too that I think you have to consider. I think Spencer Dinwiddie getting a big chunk of usage, getting 23 points is definitely something that's viable on today's slate. I think some of these secondary pieces like Dorian Finney-Smith, like Royce O'Neal also play their way in. And I think even Cam Thomas plays his way in, man. I mean, a 35% usage rate throughout the first 2 games. He's scoring like a madman right now.
Yeah.
I don't mind the Cam Thomas spot either.
Look, I mean, we've always just wanted Cam Thomas to play minutes, and that's been the issue until now. And I know dating back to last year in that stretch where he was given the opportunity to do that. I think we just kind of roll with it. It does feel like the one thing that Simmons has over everybody else on this team is that he's just underpriced. But Cam Thomas definitely, even though he is scoring dependent, definitely takes the next step up. I think you would have to kind of start talking yourself into going, like, would you rather go Cam Thomas or Zach LaVine? That's kind of where the conversation heads.
Yeah, I I don't want to keep being you know, I keep feeling like I'm hesitant on the Cam Thomas spot just because we saw the
Mm-hmm.
flux the how,
We know how
variance
bad it
hits.
can be, but was that last year, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think there is a lot of upside for the Cam Thomas spot. I think I lean with Zach LaVine as of right now, but I can, I think Thomas is a great tournament pivot. I don't think he'll be that owned today. So wouldn't mind going to the Thomas spot.
Uh, Last thing on that 1v1 specifically, you're going the Cam Thomas direction on DraftKings because he's 6K and Levine's 7,600. So that's too cheap for that price. I'm going to make sure that I got that correct. Yep, Cam Thomas is $6,000 on DraftKings. So you agree that you can
Yeah.
take him there instead?
Yeah. I think he would be the better option there. It's also about like how many Brooklyn pieces can you really get into the lineup and feel good about today.
I think it's two.
Because yeah, it's just like depending on do you want one of these cheaper guys as well? And then are you
Yeah.
thinking about playing Ben Simmons with them, especially on DraftKings where you get his double double and triple double bonuses potentially? Um, I don't know. Lots of moving factors here on this team. I think you do have to get exposure. It's just the question of how much.
To kind of wrap the piece of Brooklyn up here, we saw Deron Sharp not start in the game on Saturday. ended up playing 3 minutes. I mean, I don't expect him to necessarily play that little of minutes while Cam Johnson and they're just dealing with injuries all over the place. So I think the field's not going to be here again. I don't think we will be either. I guess I was just shocked to see the floor as low as it was.
Yeah, definitely. I think it just speaks to the fact that like they're willing to use Ben Simmons as kind of like their de facto center,
Sure.
if need
Yeah.
be, and it seems like that's kind of the way that they want to go instead. Which and then just play small ball, which worked out well for them. So I mean, they definitely probably will implore that again. I could see them running into some problems with a big Mark Williams, but I could definitely see the upside in it as well.
Let's talk about Mark Williams because another guy that went very boom in the first game, very bust in the second game. Did not show up against Detroit. 20 minutes, finished with under 10 fantasy points. Uh, how do we rank that today? And how do we think? Like, obviously, they're going to run him as much as they can, but now we know the floor is 20 minutes, and the fantasy point numbers is 10 as a floor.
Yeah, I'll just rope this into a whole Charlotte conversation. Not really interested in much on this side. I know that like our attack plan has kind of been the fact that they seem pretty shorthanded with all the injuries and stuff, and feels like a spot that we can go to. But Lamelo on the somewhat minutes limit feels iffy. Mark Williams and Nick Richards are going to continue sharing minutes, and then PJ Washington comes in. I think if they do end up going small ball, and Charlotte has a really tough time handling it, they won't play Williams. They won't play Richards. They'll just play PJ Washington at the center position. And that makes
Sure.
things even more tough for the overall dynamic of this team and the starting lineup and everything else. So I'm kind of fine with just staying away. I don't think there's anything that makes me jump off the page for any of these Charlotte guys.
So we have a lot of, and this is, I am going somewhere with this, so give me a moment here, but there are a lot of superstar talent players that I think need to be mentioned in their own conversation. You get this next group of guys like Halliburton, Lamelo, and a few others in the upper not in the mid nines and stuff like that. And so I don't really think I think that he could be fine in a game stack because you would kind of want that you would want one piece of Charlotte to potentially be able to try to get there all the way. Um, so that's kind of where I'd put it, but it's kind of hard. Like we know that the ceiling is elevated to 50 fantasy points. They gave him a few more minutes against Detroit the other day. So I guess we'll have to see. In cash, I just hate the idea of trying to always have that hindrance of 30 minutes for LaMelo, and that's going to take us off of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anything else on the DFS side of things here? If not, let's move over to Prize Picks and Underdog and talk about some pick'em stuff.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing. I looked at it a little bit. I don't think I'll write it up today, but it still is interesting to see where the Simmons line market is adjusting.
Yeah, 16 and a half rebounds and assists, 24 and a half points, rebounds and assists. I think if you're going to go with anything, you're going to go with rebounds and assists. And that 6.5 number is not, or 16 and a half number is not a bad one. Um, I don't know if I get behind any of this other stuff in terms of the Nets, but what do you think?
Yeah, the rebounds assists continue to jump up for Ben Simmons. I think it is still in a range where I'm okay with it. Just note that he's hovering right around 18, 19 for that combined stat number. So I think it's nearing. I think there's still like 1 or 2 point value there, but just don't expect that it's a free square anymore. It was a free square the first 2 games, and that's all they're going to give you probably for that. Other than that, though, I don't really think I want to rely on much on this Brooklyn side at all. If and maybe the entire game.
Yeah, and I don't want to rely on anything on the Charlotte side, so I'm fine with moving on if you are.
Yeah, I think I'm fine. You just want to touch on anything related to Mikal Bridges, just in general?
I think as long as Cam Thomas is chucking up shots, it's going to be really hard to get any Mikal Bridges love from me. You just
Yeah,
need to get
that's
a,
fair.
like he just needs more usage right now, and he's not getting it because Thomas is taking a lot of shots, and Thomas is doing it incredibly well. So that's probably the route they should go. But until we see a different change in the dynamic, I think Bridges is off on the no play list right now.
Sure. Okay, that's fair enough.
Yep. All right. Let's move on into this next game, which is going to be the Boston Celtics facing off against the Washington Wizards. Currently, we have this game at a 10.5 spread favoring the Boston Celtics. Over under is set at 230 here. Let's start off with this Celtics team first. Uh, I mean, like, this is a very good matchup. Don't get me wrong. A lot of these guys are going to come in. You also have the revenge narrative of Porzingis. I don't know how much revenge there really necessarily is. I don't know if he really doesn't like the Washington team, uh, but there is that narrative. I just worry about this one getting out of hand really quickly.
Definitely is a concern for me. It does help that the game's in Washington. I don't know. I think that's really all that you are getting excited about if you're trying to back the Wizards here. This is going to be a spot where I think Boston has the chance to, as a team, I'm trying to look at them and see how are going. Like, are they going to play with their food, or are they actually going to put away teams that they should put away? I do think that we have seen the field go guard heavy against this Washington team to start the season in terms of playing DFS guys around them. But there's just a lot of guys that they need a lot to get there. Number one, and number two, there's just a lot of mouths to feed. And I feel like Boston is going to be a team all season, as long as they stay all healthy, that you're just going to get a little bit of everything. And one guy's going to pop off here, another guy's going to pop off there. We saw that with Jaylen Brown last time out, and now he finally got the price increase to the point where you can't play that in cash. So I am still waiting for the Drew Holiday game. We kind of we did kind of see that against Miami. So I will say that it is most certainly already kind of been a thing, but I don't know if you can go in with any of these guys in cash as long as those 5, 6 are all healthy.
Yeah, it's a tough environment, and like you said, a lot of mouths to feed. And not a lot to do it with, especially against a Washington team where this game could be over by the fourth quarter, and you could see some bench pieces come in pretty early, and some of these main guys losing some minutes to it.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I think if the game blows out, someone or two of them do really, really well. But if you're on the wrong side of that, I think you could be sunken cash if you pick the wrong guy, which is really, that's kind of the nature again of what Boston's going to be this year.
What do you think about the Porzingis narrative? Is there any backing to it? Do you think it's real,
No,
or do you think this is a spot that it's like, he was kind of there. He was. It was basically like a rental deal almost, and then they got rid of him. He's probably happier
yeah.
being on the Celtics
Oh yeah, I'm sure
than
he's
he was on
probably
the
the
Wizards.
happiest he's been in his career. So
Yeah.
I don't think that the Washington thing's anything to be of note here. I think anytime the biggest narrative for Porzingis is just in New York, and that's it.
For sure. All right. Talk about the Wizards side. I'm not interested. I believe in this Boston defense, and I think your main guy in Jordan Poole is going to get absolutely locked up by Drew Holiday, and it's going to be a very bad day to be a Jordan Poole backer.
Yeah. Did you see? I think I sent this in our group chat. Jordan Poole got Nick Younged this weekend, where he went up for a three, turned around to the opposing bench, and then he bricked it. So
Oh
that's
no.
kind of the Jordan Poole experience. Uh, I think this is a great day to take Jordan Poole turnovers and Jordan Poole unders. So that's where I'll stick with that, and we'll talk about that in the pick'em stuff. But yeah, zero interest for me in anything related to Washington, and they get another piece back in Johnny Davis. So again, more depth to the table.
Talk about a tough time. You have to go against Marcus Smart in your last game and then against Drew Holiday in your next game. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't get much tougher than those two matchups. Okay. Do you have anything else in this game? I have no interest in pick'em stuff. I think you can completely skip over pick'em stuff for this one. But if you have anything of interest, give it up now.
I don't really want to do this, so I will just say that we will just touch on the fact that Daniel Gafford could sit in this game. I would have zero interest in playing anybody that would back him up. I'm not playing Mike Muscala, not playing Danilo, and just don't think it's worth the viable money that you would have to take for those guys. So I am off there. And then the only thing that I'd want in this game would just be to check on what Pool's numbers look like, and that would be where I'd stop. 22 and a half points, field goal attempts, 17 and a half. I don't know. I mean, they're coming in thinking that this is probably going to be a situation where he's going to fail. So I don't think lower of points is the worst. I also don't think it's anywhere near the top 10 for us.
Oh man, they didn't give us. They got scared of the turnover number. Everyone and their
Yep,
mom took
was looking
over
for
three
that
and a
too.
half. Everyone and their mom probably took over 3.5 for the last game, and we saw how that worked out. He gave up 5, so I think he'll consistently be a turnover guy, but no number out there right now, as of right now. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's move on into this next game, which is going to be the Portland Trailblazers facing off against the Toronto Raptors. Raptors come in as 9-point favorites. Over under is set at 216. Pretty ugly game. Let's talk about the Portland side first. We're waiting on some OG and Anunoby news. He's questionable due to the cramping. We got a lot of confusing news when they went into Philly. He was in
Yeah.
and then he was out, and it kind of went back and forth throughout the coming up into lock on Saturday. What do we think about this Portland side first, though? And are we going back to the Shade and Sharp play because he feels like a guy that just continues to at least get close to paying off this price tag? And I think Scoot's someone you also have to mention, though both of them, at least Scoot's definitely having those rookie troubles of trying to adjust to the league.
Yeah, he'll be fine. I think he'll figure it out, but it is certainly a concern. Like, you cannot play the guy in cash right now. This is going to be great maybe in 2 or 3 games from now. If Scoot turns the corner, maybe we can jump on it a little bit early, but right now it's just not going to be a thing. And I think that they are going to rely on Shade and Sharp, whose price tag continues to increase. Definitely not the best day against Philly, and that game definitely ran out of the building yesterday. But a strong performance against Orlando, a lot of minutes, and he's going to be playing as many minutes as they can give him. I think that Malcolm Brogdon continues to be a staple of a floor play that you can get excited for. I don't think he's going to give you a massive ceiling by any means. I think that ceiling's probably around the 40 mark, but he's going to be a guy that's going to get you 25 to 30 fantasy points. And at that price, I think I'm okay with it. But maybe we're looking for just a little bit more. If you got under 30 for Brogdon today, I think I would be a little disappointed because I think the days, Josh, of the maybe we can have a conversation for this on a smaller slate, but I think the days of the 5x cash for NBA and player value is gone. I think you have to look for guys that are going to give you more of a floor of 6 with the upside of 8, so or 7 or 8. So I think that Brogdon's okay. I think Sharp is certainly fine. I worry about anybody playing or facing the Raptors. I think that's, trying to trust anything here for Portland just feels like a crapshoot, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when they get blown out and stuff. Like it tanks all the upside of this potential lineup. So hard to get behind anything that you can really like here. Let's talk about the other side. We saw
Well,
Scotty have a
before
really
before we do that, do we want to just touch on, like, can you play DeAndre with Robert Williams out? We haven't. It's going to be a one of many things this year with this team because I would expect Williams to miss games quite frequently. What do we do with DeAndre Ayton here?
Are you excited about
No, you're
DeAndre Ayton
not.
matchup with? Yeah,
You're not. But this is the first game where maybe DeAndre plays more than 30 minutes.
yeah. I guess it could potentially be. I just go back to the fact that um, it's really hard to get behind anyone on this any starter on this Portland team because of the fact that they're going to. I'm not saying they're going to lose. They're an NBA team. They definitely have a chance to keep up, but it'd be pretty hard for them to keep up in this environment in Toronto.
Yeah, I think it's fair, and they are 8.5 point underdogs, so I get it, and it's a low total. So none of this sounds great. I'm just fishing for conversation. I think at this point.
Yeah. I just I don't know. I have no interest in this spot. I think Aiton might be fine, but I think you also just have better options elsewhere.
Sure. Okay.
All right. Let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about Toronto. If OG's out again, I wouldn't mind going Scotty. We saw him have a really effective game against Philly where he kind of filled the stat sheet. We're seeing consistently around the 45 mark, and we're seeing him kind of take a step up in play compared to what he did last year. How much does Scotty Barnes interest you? How much does the rest of this team interest you in this matchup against Portland?
I think you can safely rule Siakam out on the no play list right now, especially tonight against the Jeremy Grant matchup. Even in situations that Siakam has been able to thrive, he still hasn't. So the guy has not gotten over 35 fantasy points this year, which his value is on FanDuel is 40 plus. So you can't go there. But I would like to try to do something here if OG is out, and we know that Precious Lachua is probably not going to play too. So uh, you want to try to find something here. I just saw the Jakob stuff. Not a guy we've really paid attention to or talked about so far this year. Hasn't been able to play enough minutes to really get there. Maybe that is a tick up in the right direction for him tonight. But they just have a lot of guys that just do not enough to really make you feel good about the situation. Do you think that we see Scotty Barnes get the matchup with Jeremy Grant, or will it be Siakam here? Because that kind of depends on the decision.
I think Siakam will most likely get the Jeremy Grant matchup. I think Matisse Thybulle will most likely get the Scotty matchup.
I don't know. I think that the Scotty Barnes is somewhat, you know, intriguing, right? I think that the floor has definitely shown this year, and you would just need a few things to go your way, which I think this early on in the slate we'll have a good idea of that being a thing. Is OG questionable, or is he a doubtful like Achua? He's questionable. Okay.
He's questionable.
Hmm. I don't know. Seeing as they, I don't know, they played on Saturday, so it's tough to see. I guess this is just like a wait and see approach.
Yeah, definitely feels like a wait and see approach. I think Scotty's fine if OG's out, but we just kind of have to wait for that news before we make any determination. Prize picks. I kind of just, again, I'm not really interested in Trailblazers. I think you need to wait for OG news before you decide on the Scotty decision or on any of these Trailblazers or on any of these Raptors in terms of whether you want to play them or not. So kind of a wait and see, kind of why you have to subscribe to the product sometimes to get our thoughts after this injury analysis.
Yeah, if OG sat, I'd also be slightly interested in Dennis Schroeder stuff. Price tag of 6,600 is not something I would play if OG is in, but if he's out, then I could see us having slightly a little bit more interest in that spot. But 21 and a half points assists is something he has been able to do pretty consistently the first couple of games of the year. And he should be in the benefit of, if Brogdon's not the guy starting, then I think that he should be just fine.
For sure. All right. Let's move on into this next game if you're ready to do that. You good to go?
Good to go.
Okay, let's talk about this next game, which is going to be the Pistons and the Thunder facing off. Or no, sorry, my bad. Got excited and skipped to the game that I really want to talk about. But first, we have to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves facing off against the Atlanta Hawks. Currently, Timberwolves come in as 2-point favorites. Over under is at 228 and a half. Let's start with this Timberwolves team. I think that there is in a matchup against Atlanta, where Atlanta kind of played a little bit over their heads last night. Not a little bit, a lot over their heads last night. I think there is some potential upside for this Minnesota team. It's just depending on where you can find it. I think that, guys like Conley are continue to draw some interest for me because I think you have a pretty safe floor with the minutes they get and with the offense they're surrounded by. I don't know if I'm willing to spend up on an Anthony Edwards or on a Carl Anthony Towns or anything, but give me your thoughts on this Timberwolves team and what you think they can do against Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think people love to pay down. At least that's a trend so far this year, just underpriced point guards, and Conley has shown that he is definitely in that category, and they just kind of refuse to bump him up as of right now. So 5,400 is a good price. The minutes are going to be in the solid 28 to 30 range, and we've seen two matchups now that he's been able to be successful in, despite I think honestly having tougher matchups versus this Atlanta team, which I don't think will be as much. So everything looks pretty good here, and you're going to get an occasional blocker steal that's going to help influence this a little bit. So I like what this spot brings to the table for Mike Conley. There's also the fact that we might not get Shake Milton today, who got added to the injury report late. So he's currently questionable now. So that could raise some upside as well. But yeah, I think that, while Anthony Edwards is okay, I think that he, at least so far this year, has shown to be a little bit more, on this, if things are not falling from the scoring side, he's not going to get there fully. He will have a spot where I think he's going to average 25 points a game this year, but it does feel like there are some things that just the Timberwolves need to kind of just work on and get through. So I'm okay with going the Conley route. A couple games in, I think that Edwards could potentially see the DeJounte Murray stuff, which is not necessarily ideal for cash. And outside of that, man, I don't really feel like touching anything. And, Cat kind of been a disappointment from the scoring angle. You need that to cash. So I'm just kind of, it does feel like it's Mike Conley or bust. But what do you think about Towns and Gobert potentially as well?
I think Towns is just fine. I don't think there's anything great about it. I don't think there's anything bad about it necessarily. I think it's a pretty decent matchup. He's going to have the size advantage on whoever they start at power forward, whether it be Jalen Johnson or Sadiq Bey. And I think there certainly is some upside there. I just feel like you have better ways to spend your money today rather than spending it on Karl Anthony Towns.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, he's in that range of like just below the superstar level on fantasy sites. And again, I think you should just be reaching all the way up to get one of those guys up there instead. Um, I don't know. I'd hate to see you spend your money on Karl Anthony Towns at 9K and he gives you 30 fantasy points and somebody else goes off for $1,000 more for 60. So that's where I'd sit there. I do think that both centers in this game will have to play as many minutes as they can give. Rudy's had 2 games now over 30 minutes. Production has certainly been there. Blocks and steals have been there in certain aspects. So I think that that's okay. It's not the best, but I also think that you get, and this is more of a tournament play today, but Naz Reid, if he gets the closer to the 30-minute mark like he did against Miami, and we know that he can be, I wouldn't expect 25 points a game, but a consistent double threat with some block and steal upside. 5,500 is a decent price for that in tournaments if you wanted to go that direction. But it does feel like this game is just kind of centered around some fringe tournament plays outside of the Conley stuff so far.
Yeah, really tough matchup. Not tough matchup. It's actually a pretty easy matchup, but just tough. Again, it kind of comes down to what we talked about with Boston. Lots of mouths to feed. I don't think there's. It's hard to take a shot on just one of these guys and feel really good about it. So it's kind of how you handle the Minnesota side. Let's talk about the Hawk side. And Trey Young's been really disappointing to start out the season. It's hard to go there. I think if I'm going anywhere, it's going to be to Jalen Johnson or Sadiq Bey. I'm tempted to go to the guy whoever comes off the bench. Like that's the guy who's been doing better between the two of them. If Sadiq comes off the bench, he ends up actually playing more minutes. If Jalen Johnson comes off the bench, he actually ends up playing more minutes. So it's been a little bit of a funky rotation, but I wouldn't mind just playing whoever comes off the bench and feeling good about that between the two of them. But I don't think they're musts. I think Clint Capella's out of the conversation. I think this Atlanta side's just been really rough from the Trey Young perspective, so it's hard to figure out anything else. But I'm interested in attacking these wings, and I could see Sadiq or Jalen Johnson doing pretty well here.
Yeah, you want one of the wings, and I think that those guys are, some of the one of the only like one or two guys on this team that are the price is not caught up to them. And it was also encouraging to see. I'm always encouraged at the beginning of the year how teams handle or how these players are doing as their team is blowing somebody else out. So, by the way, whenever Jalen Johnson plays in Milwaukee again, we need to play him because he went to, no joke. I looked at this, didn't even know it was a thing, but my lady and I, we live on the upper east side of Milwaukee, and Jalen Johnson went to high school 5 minutes from here. So
Wow.
uh, did not know that, and that made sense as to why there was a lot of people cheering for him last night.
Yeah.
So he's fine. I think Sadiq Bey is also solid. Both those guys feel like they're underpriced, and yeah, I think that those two are fine. And that's kind of it. I don't think Atlanta is necessarily a cash game staple.
Yeah, I would tend to agree there. All right. Pickup side of things, anything that jumps out to you, I kind of just want to stay bullish on this Trey Young train and kind of continue to take unders on his points because he's just not hitting shots right now. He's looked really bad, and so I think under 24.5 points is just fine. Even though there's no real standout defender that's going up against him, I think that he's just having a really shitty start to the season, and that's something that I'm willing to attack.
Yeah, I'm willing to go to the unders as well. I think that if you couldn't do it against Damian Lillard last night, that's a rough look to start the year. A couple pretty easy matchups for him too, all things said.
Yeah.
So, I'm okay with going under there. maybe under fantasy if that comes up in a few hours. I'm also interested in the Mike Conley assist numbers. He's got it's sitting at 5 right now, so that would be the play for the other side for me.
It's hard for me to go under fantasy because like he's still getting a good amount of assists and stuff. And so
Mm-hmm.
like if I'm taking an under here, it's just going to be on points alone. He's just not
Okay.
scoring effectively right now. So I think I'd stay away from fantasy under. I think I'd go with points under and feel good about that.
Okay.
Um Anything else in this game? I feel like, we haven't talked about much that we really like. We're gonna get into some stuff that we really like later on in the slate, but this one's kind of just it's hard to break down.
Yeah, it does feel like the first half of the slate is something where I think you can feel good about some Brooklyn stuff, but other than that, kind of feels like you don't have to play it in cash. I say that Chicago Indiana is a game, but like there's not much early news, and we've dealt with like every single day so far. Start the season, there's been a lot of news early in the slate.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Let's move on into this next game, Jared, which is going to be the Detroit Pistons taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder. Thunder are 6-point home favorites with an over under set at 225. Let's start off with this Pistons team. I just think you have an absolute stud in Jalen Duren right now. He is rebounding like a
Yeah.
madman. He looks like a franchise type center. He's developing exactly how they want him to, and he's taken a huge step up. I think you play him, man. I think he's your center today. I don't think there's much around it. Like, I think at the end of the day, you just get a guy that's going up against a string bean of a center in Chet Holmgren, and it's just such a good matchup for him. He should be able to overpower him in the paint, where Duran's getting most of his points, and he should be able to get rebounds at ease here. So all over the Jalen Duran stuff. I love the spot. I think it's super good.
Yep, we played some of these pick'em selections for Duran over the weekend. I think you just have to continue going here because it does feel like he is a bit too underpriced still. Probably $1,000 underpriced, which you're talking about a guy that could be a 9K center, which is crazy, but he's doing it and he's winning. I think he's winning the job. I don't think it's 100% won yet, unless you think so. I think we're really close. Um, they're not playing James Wiseman. They haven't played him a single minute this season. Marvin Bagley is relegated to a bench role now, and Isaiah Stewart, he plays alongside of him in the starting lineup at least so far. But it's clear that they have basically funneled everything towards the Jalen Duren spot. So I think that he currently has what it takes to do this, and he's going to get up for this matchup because I would say most people think that Chet Holmgren's better than him as of this moment right now. So I
Yeah.
think that there's an extra narrative there. This game is exciting from a lot of angles, and that's definitely one of them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a big part here too is the fact that Cade's going to run into a really tough matchup with either Lou or Shea on him, and that's going to make things even rougher for this team overall. I think that Duran has a chance to really explode on the scoring side, and
Sure.
that gets really exciting when you consider he should be able to get his usual 12 plus boards and then also get the points added in there. Could be a very, very nice day for Jalen Duran. So, really like the Duran stuff. I really like some other stuff on this team too. Like, I don't mind going to Osar Thompson as well, who has been a little bit iffy from the points category, don't get me wrong, but the minutes are very consistent, and he's shown that he's very much a hustle player with his rebounds and assists and getting lots of steals as well. I like the Osar Thompson spot in terms of his price tag and what he brings to the floor, and I think the only guy that I'm probably going to be out on is going to be Cade Cunningham with that really tough matchup he's going to have.
Agreed there. I think that as long as Boyan is out, then there are pathways to other guys succeeding, and it does feel like they're just going to give Thompson the role and not play um, some of the other guys that we have rostered in years past. I'm probably out on the Killian Hayes stuff for the time being with the minutes that he's getting. I know that Alec Burks had one really solid game against Charlotte, and then he's going to just be this guy that I think, maybe you can play on a smaller slate, but we'll have to see what happens with him when Boyan comes back. So it does feel like you kind of are just crossing one guy off at a time here. So I'm also off of Cade. I know that we played him the night that he played Charlotte and ran into some foul trouble. I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster correction period for him as the season goes on.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. All right. Let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about Oklahoma City because I feel like this is a spot where you could get some exposure. I don't know how I necessarily feel about Shea being at 11-8 right now. I know
Yeah.
he's had two 60-point performances, 60 FanDuel point performances, but um, I don't know, man. It's a heavy price tag to pay. I think it just comes down to like, would you rather play Shea or would you rather play Luca? And for me, 9 times
Oh
out of
yeah.
10, it's going to be Luca, especially
Hmm.
with the news that we just got, which we'll break down when we get to that
Yeah.
game. But um, yeah, I think Luca it just ends up being your better option. I think Shea's a great tournament pivot. Don't get me wrong, but
Hmm.
I just don't know if I want to go there.
I think as the season goes along, you're going to find that this OKC team is going to just be very tournament focused in terms of playing them in fantasy. I don't really think that there's anything that stands out to me because it does feel like we are seeing floors from these guys. Um, After we're going to see like the highest of high ceilings and the very low floors for some of these individuals. So they also don't have an injury outside of Kenrich Williams that's really going to prohibit much here. So I was going to suggest one of Jalen Williams or Lou Dort, but I don't know if that's necessary. If you found that you had 5,600 at, maybe this doesn't even apply anymore, seeing as the news that we just got. But if Jalen Williams was, if you had 6K and you wanted to play one of Dort or Williams as your small forward last position, I'm okay with that.
I think most likely what I would try to do is try to find that extra 800 and get up to Giddy, man. I mean, this feels like one of those Zach Levine instances where the price tag's probably too cheap, right? At 6,800. Like I know he just had a
Maybe
really
he
bad
hasn't
performance.
shown it, but
Yeah, I guess, but I mean, it's against Cleveland for one matchup. Really tough matchup, really tough defense. Probably a Coro was on him in that game, so tough matchup. It's against Denver where they got blown out, didn't get to play the last quarter. And against Chicago, I mean, you looked okay. It wasn't anything great, but Chicago's also running at one of the slowest paces in the NBA right now. So I don't know. I think it's a mix of really bad games, really bad matchups for him. And I'm not saying that this one's necessarily the best. I just think you're getting a good price tag for what the upside it holds. It's more of a tournament play than anything else, but it's going to be highlighted by people because of the fact that he's so cheap.
sure. I mean, maybe we let this figure itself out, and when we have a spot where the guards are going to be in play more so, and Chet, because I think that Josh Giddey is getting his usage usurped by Chet at the moment. So if that flip flops for a game, then that would be the spot I'd go to.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anything else in this one? If not, let's talk about pickup stuff.
No, let's talk about pick'em stuff. I want to try to have as much exposure as possible to this game while trying not to overdo it at the same time. So I think that I could be interested in potentially taking a Cade Cunningham under because I don't think the points will necessarily be there for him today. But it does kind of start and end with the Duran stuff. And if you are able to find a rebound number by itself, I would love to see what it was. But it does feel like that we're going to have to wait on that, at least on the underdog side.
13 over on prize picks is what
I
that
was
rebound
asking a
number is
lot,
at.
but I think it's doable.
I think it's very doable with how he's been rebounding. I think what I'd rather go with is 28.5 points and rebounds. Getting that
Hmm.
combo, I already said, like he should have a good matchup today. Cade's going to be struggling. I like that Cade under. I also like Cade over assist, which he has been in the past. He has been a very good passer, so like I know he can get to that assist total, and we've seen 9 and 10 already this season, and both in spots where like the team had a defender that was on him that was pretty tough. You know, in Miami. They probably put a lot of Jimmy on him and a lot of Kyle Lowry, which was tough. In Chicago, they probably put a lot of Caruso on him. So, like, we've seen him pass in situations where he needs to end up passing, and I think this could be one of them against an OKC team that will throw a lot of good defensive players out there at him. Anything else? I think everything else is just like overpriced, honestly, on this Oklahoma City side. Like Shea at 29.5 points, you're asking for a lot, man. I don't know if I can get there. I don't know if I can get to the Chet numbers that they have up right now. Just a kind of whole bunch of wishy washy stuff.
Sure. No, I think that that's fine, and just putting a little bit more conviction behind the Duran stuff. 28.5 points, rebounds, just like PrizePicks is on Underdog. And he's cleared that in every single game so far this season via the props.cash hit chart. So it's strong. And I think that this is probably the last time that you probably see that number under 30.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anything else in this game? If not, let's keep it moving then.
Nope, let's keep it moving.
All right. Next game up is going to be the Warriors at the Pelicans. Pelicans come in as the home favorites at -4.5. Over under is at
Mm.
224.5. I would keep an eye out for news, man. Back to back, traveling back to back as well. Um, I don't know. I have a feeling that we're going to get hit with some Golden State stuff at some point in today, whether it be Curry ends up sitting or someone ends up sitting. I wouldn't be shocked if the old man crew here would end up getting hit with some back to back resting spots.
Yep. So I mean, last night we saw them do something similar where, I mean, they uh, ended up starting Draymond, and they put Chris Paul on the bench to come off first, and so I think that we may see some dabbling around with how they approach that. For that reason, I think like I'm willing. Again, this is just like we don't have any news right now. But if Chris Paul's coming off the bench, I think that that's probably a spot where I'm off of the price tags as they are right now until that we see that correct itself. But I do agree with you. I could see something happen to where they are very careful with and very surgical with how they pick their landing spots for guys to sit. So I think we just have to just wait on that one. Klay Thompson seems to be the candidate of the guy that would sit though. He's questionable right now.
Yeah, I think that Clay could end up sitting. I don't know. I could see a lot. We got all the Warriors props off the board right now, so it'll be interesting to see who ends up sitting and who ends up doesn't. But I
Yep.
know Thompson's questionable. Don't be shocked if another guy here ends up also being questionable or just being ruled out closer to game time in terms of Curry or whoever.
Is there any Chris Paul narrative strength in this? Not really.
No,
It's
no,
been so
I
long.
don't think so.
I
Yeah.
don't think it's a
Also,
thing
just a
here. So
completely different team too. Like it's not.
I
That
know.
was a
I know.
like they
Maybe
moved.
like the city, or maybe he knows. I
Uh,
don't know.
yeah,
Just not.
maybe,
It's too
but
much of
I
a
doubt
stretch.
it though. Yeah, exactly. I don't think there's anything I want on this Warrior side in terms of DFS. Let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about some Pelicans here. Anything you like on this side of the ball?
This is something that happened over the weekend as well. It just feels like they ended up going and pretty much uh, manhandling New York, and it kind of just forced everybody to fall short. So that's kind of where I see how they like. I'm not going to call them relative to Boston, but it does feel like there's just so much going on here, and they have a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things. And I just feel like there's like 4 or 5 guys on this team that can just put up 20 and 10 or like 18 and 15, and then everybody kind of just falls short by 5 points. So I think I'm out with this one, honestly, unless you think that the Golden State road stuff is still a thing.
No, I don't. Well, maybe it is, but I don't know if it's early enough in the season to tell whether it is or not. I don't know. Like you said, like there's just a lot of mouths to feed. A lot of guys that are injury free and playing to their full ability, and it's going to be tough to get anyone that you really like here that you can feel comfortable with. I think if there was one guy that I'd be willing to take a shot on, it would be Brandon Ingram. The scoring looks consistent, the shot taking looks consistent, stuff looks really good from his end. But outside of that, I think you can just stay away.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. They still have 2 wings and a guard out, so it's but at the same time, you are having Zion back, and having Zion back is exactly what we didn't have last year, and so that's kind of where everything just honestly dies, in my opinion, in terms of value. I think that they will be just fine, and considering that the Pelicans are favored here, uh, yeah, we're gonna see 1 or 2 Golden State guys probably sit, probably just one though.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's keep it moving and talking about pick'em stuff. Anything of interest here for you? I'm perfectly fine with staying away from this one.
No, and we could even see more than one guy sit, and if that was the case, then I think things could run away for the Pelicans here.
Yep, they certainly could. All right, let's keep it moving. Move on into this next game, which is going to be The Miami Heat taking on the Milwaukee Bucks. Currently, we have the Bucks as 6.5 point home favorites. Over under is set at 225. Man, we already talked about the Dame stuff at the beginning of the show. Kind of weird to think about that was an hour ago, but just really disappointing performance last night from him. Went 2 for 12, just could not get his shot going, and it ultimately resulted in Milwaukee losing big against the Hawks. So, what do you think about the Dame spot now? I think you can make the case that he probably gets a pretty decent matchup, considering that Jimmy will have to be most likely somewhere else guarding someone else on this team, and I think there is some upside for the Dame spot. But do you think the narrative plays into this at all? Like, the fact Miami tried to trade for him, kind of went back and forth, and just wasn't able to get the job done at the end of the day.
I'm torn because this could go one of two ways, but I think it only goes one of two ways. Number one, this is probably the reason why Milwaukee just didn't come out firing yesterday. They probably looked a little bit past the game against the Hawks to circle this game. This game's probably been circled on their calendar for a couple months now. And yeah, this absolutely is a narrative that I would be willing to bet on. Problem is, like, does this narrative apply to Dame? And I think the answer is no. Actually, it could, in the fact that he was involved in the trade talks, etc. So maybe he'd be like, if Milwaukee loses, it would be the most Miami offseason thing of all time. Um, so I don't know. There's a couple angles here. So number one, I think Milwaukee has the date circled. I think Giannis has the ability to put up a really good game despite having a really tough matchup. If this narrative wasn't a thing and it didn't exist, I would say we go right back to the well with Dame. When is the I heard a stat on the broadcast. He has never had college, high school, pros, never had a game where he didn't score for 3 quarters. And he almost got there yesterday where he almost didn't score until the fourth quarter yesterday. I don't think that he's going to have a worse game this season. So narrative aside, take that completely out of it and just say that's neutral. Damian Lillard would be the best play on this team.
You think so? You don't think it's Giannis?
I don't think
I'm
it's
kind of back
Giannis.
and forth.
I do too. I think there's extra motivation here, but at the price tag, I would much rather take Dame.
If Bam is out though, like who do they throw at him? Like, is it really going to
Well,
be
that's a
Jimmy
big part
guarding
of this too.
Giannis?
It's a big
Yeah,
part of this too.
that's the thing that I'm kind of struggling with. Is that like depending on the Bam determination, if they don't have Bam, they're just going to be
Oh, then it's
outsized and
Giannis. Yeah.
outmatched. Yeah, it's going to be a really good matchup for Giannis. Last two matchups against the Heat before he got injured, played a game where he only played 6 minutes, but the two matchups before that, he scored 72 FanDuel points and 60 FanDuel points, Jared. Like he's had some
Yeah.
massive games against this
This
team.
will
So
feel like a playoff game tonight for what it's worth.
it'll be a lot of fun. Are you going to the game? Are you thinking about going?
No. But I wish,
You got
but I
Monday Night
should. I
Football.
should think about it. But
You
probably
got
not.
Monday Night Football. It's going to be tough. But yeah, you should
Yeah.
think about going to the game. That would be a fun one to watch, man. I'd be excited. But yeah, I don't know. Like it's just a tough spot, and like I think you just have to wait for the injury designation on Bam to figure out what you're really doing here at the end of the day.
So are we at the point of the show? We'll talk about it because I think we have at least one. We've already kind of alluded to it, like Luka's going to be in a great spot today. But are we at the point now where we can say definitively, like, we already kind of talked about, like, if Duran's going to be your pay up guy at center, it could make things a little bit more difficult trying to get 2 stars or 2 guys above 9K in there with him as well. Are we at the point where you're putting one of Dame or Giannis in the build, and then depending on the Bam injury news, I don't think we get that before lock. You make a pivot afterward, and then you kind of feel that situation out.
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, you're trying to get those two guys above 9K today, and even with Duran, which makes it tough, there are savings options out there that I feel pretty comfortable with that can kind of help the build overall.
Yeah.
I will say, like, it's only possible if you go Dame. Like, it's not possible to go Luca and Giannis uh, in this spot because it's
Okay.
just too much money taken up. But you'd have to sacrifice Luca, which I don't think is like. There's ways to get off of Luca that I think are very viable today. Yeah, I'm kind of back and forth here on it, but I think you are trying to get those two 9K guys and then going from there.
It's kind of how I feel about it at the moment. And yeah, that's again maybe it is. I don't know if it's like the best, but it does help. Like I don't know, paying trying to get some 4 or 5K guard would certainly help that. We've talked about a few of them today. I think that you have to have one of these guys from Milwaukee locked in, and I know that's also to say that Chris Middleton's going to be back, and I think that he plays probably. I can't say we can't say he plays more than 20 minutes until we see it. And considering he had the night off yesterday, it's where he was going to be coming into play this one today. So I don't know. I think that it does kind of revolve around one of those guys. And you could say that Brooke Lopez would be in a great spot if Bam didn't play either.
Yeah, for sure. He definitely would be in a very good spot. I think that could potentially overtake what you do with Duran, but it just all depends on the Bam injury, which, like you said, who knows if we even know that before lock, but hopefully we get that news.
Yeah,
Let's
same
talk about
time.
the Miami.
Dern and the Thunder and the Bucks play at the same time, so it does help there.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about Miami a little bit. Any interest for you? But I feel like for me, it's a no. You just have to wait until you get this Bam news to really figure out what you're going to do with this Miami team.
Yeah, there is a piece, and again, it does hinge on that. Well, number one, Josh Richardson plans to come back here. He's upgraded to questionable. It does feel like he'll trend in that direction. We already know Caleb Martin's out. I don't really know how much we can trust from Richardson. Probably 15 to 20 minutes at the most. Um, it does feel like Kevin Love's going to come back too, so maybe they are just trying to flip flop some guys around. I don't know how much this actually means for Miami, but you have two narratives of guys that used to play here. The Jimmy Butler is the main one. He went to Marquette, so he's played not in the same stadium, but obviously is a thing every single time, and we know what happened last year. So there's that. But then there's the other side of things, and there's Tyler Hero, who went to high school here. So I don't. He usually ends up balling out in Milwaukee. We've seen it historically a lot. I'll actually pull it up for you, see what we can do about this spot last year. But the price tag is just in a spot where I'm not super thrilled about it with guys coming back. If Bam sits, then it does elevate that whole starting group, though.
He's been so iffy. I was just looking at this because I remembered the Milwaukee
Iffy?
narrative.
Yeah,
I mean, not iffy necessarily, but you're talking about getting guys with 6K to 8K up or 6X to X 8X upside. Do you
sure.
really feel like 40 FanDuel points is going to get you there today? Because I mean, it's okay. It's not great. It's not something that I'm willing to take a bet on in terms of playing him and sacrifice. I mean, because like you play a 7K guy in this build that you have two 9K stars and Jalen Duran, it's nearly impossible.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Hero would be my option if that was the build that we were left with. The only thing I can say is that the matchup for Hero is better than it has been recently with no Drew.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with that. Definitely. Definitely a better matchup overall. Anything else here in this game? If not, let's talk about some pick'em stuff.
No, it pretty much completely hinges on Bam because then you can kind of shift some things around. Like if Bam was out, so right now I lean with Dame as the better book. But if Bam was out, then well, do you do whatever you can to get there? To Giannis?
Mm, if Bam is out, yeah, I think you
Mm-hmm.
do. I think you do.
That's kind of where I lean as well.
Because I think if that's the case, like Jimmy's going to have to shift over to Dame, and then it just leaves Giannis with a lot of open opportunities. I don't think Jimmy has the capabilities to guard Giannis as he needs to. So,
Well,
yeah, I
yeah.
think you would force your
Every
way
possession,
into
no, I agree with you.
yeah for sure. Okay, I think that let's talk about this Giannis spot really quickly. I'm curious what the numbers look like because 26.5 points, 44.5 points, rebounds, and assists. I mean, if Bam's out, like I think you have to wait until 8 to make any of your determinations here on who you're going to play and who you're not going to play. But or wait until you just get this Bam news. But I'd be willing to take the over in rebounds if we got Bam out.
Yeah, I would too. I also think that points rebounds is a thing regardless. So I know we're not going to we're probably not going to provide anything for Giannis for the members, so it's not like we're hiding any info here. But we would need to know some of the BAM news before placing a selection. I still feel pretty bullish about 38.5 points rebounds specifically for the narrative.
Yeah, I could certainly get behind that. All right. Anything else here, Jared? If not, let's move on to this next game. Three more left.
I think the only thing I had on my list was that you could say that Dame is, if you want to bet on the bounce back, I think he's fine. But again, that's a lot to ask. 28.5.
Yeah, you certainly did not get a discount just because of one bad game.
No, I was hoping they give us like 25, but they're not going to do that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Next game up is going to be the Mavs facing off against the Grizzlies. Mavericks 2-point road favorites. Over under set at 226. Let's talk about this Dallas side first. We got the news just a little bit ago that Kyrie Irving is going to be questionable due to a left foot sprain. With him being questionable, I mean, how? First of all, did you see the shot that Luka made? Because I got to see the replays of it. I didn't get to see the actual thing live, but probably one of the most impressive shots I've ever seen from an NBA player. Like, except for like maybe like pure luck, like half court shots and stuff. Like that shot was insane,
No, just the replays. So I didn't
dude.
watch. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's up there with one of the best that he's had ever, right? So it actually kind of funny. It's like the exact Kyrie Irving shot in the finals.
Yeah, it is very similar. You're 100% right. Did you see like the courtside view of it, like from right behind
Mm,
him almost?
no.
Oh my goodness, it just makes it look all that like the throw and everything. It just makes it look that much more special. But anyway, enough of that. We can talk about Luca's greatness on another smaller slate. Uh, how in play is Luca here, and do you even need to wait for this Kyrie news? Can you just play him regardless?
I think you're just playing him regardless. Not as simple as that, but it is pretty clear cut.
Yeah, I would agree that it is pretty simple as that. As you play him regardless. I think this is just a really good spot. I'm not scared of Marcus Smart defense. He's gone up against it before and done relatively well, and so I just think Luke is your guy here. The question is, if we do see Kyrie end up sitting, is there anyone else you get excited about? Because I feel like Tim Hardaway makes himself uh, a likely candidate to be a guy who ends up playing a few more minutes and getting up a few more shots. I think that why is the name Josh Green is another guy that I think you
Yep.
expect to get more minutes and more shots. There's a few guys that I think take a little bit of a jump if you do see Kyrie sit. So who else are you interested in if Kyrie Irving ends up not playing this game?
Well, I definitely think it would be Tim Hardaway first off for that. I think you would also, man, I don't want to do it, but it would open up a lot of shots for Grant Williams too. Again,
Gross,
don't
gross.
want to. I know, don't want to, but he is under 5K on FanDuel. Where is? Oh, okay, yeah. The scroll down to get to Josh Green. So there's that. I would play him first over than Grant Williams, but it would be
Oh,
Luca, Tim Hardaway. If Kyrie's out, I think you're playing three Mavs.
yeah, I would agree. Too much usage given up, and I
Yep.
think you just need more shot takers. So yeah, I definitely like the way that's going. Anything else on this Dallas side? I think the center position is unplayable. I'll admit you were right on the Derek Lively stuff. I got a little bit excited about one game, but we did see him pretty much effectively split minutes with Dwight Powell, and so that's going to be pretty hard to get to. And I think if that's it, I'm fine to talk about the other side because I think there's some good pieces on this Memphis side too.
Think so, man. The entire field played Xavier Tillman, and that's the spot that we jumped off. And I think I mean, there was other
Heck
reasons why we
yeah,
didn't play Tillman that night, uh, but he certainly did not perform well, and I think that could scare people off today. I think that one of him or Jaren Jackson is not necessarily a must, but it's pretty close.
yeah, I agree. I'm happy we started out here because this is exactly where I was going to start out. I love the Tillman spot. I think it's really good. I think that, we're going to continue attacking big men against this Dallas team because they just don't have the defense to put up with
Yep.
it. So really like Xavier Tillman, really like Jaren Jackson. I think if I have to go to one or the other, it's going to be Tillman for affordability reasons, just to make
Yep.
sure you can get everything else that you really want in your build. But I think either one is really solid, and Jackson has a ton of tournament upside.
Yeah, I mean, Tillman's price on DraftKings is certainly a little bit more of a question. Meaning like it's not the free square it was last week. And I think that we just saw, I mean, I don't know. I'd be very curious to see what the ownership was because I don't think it's anywhere near what it was on Saturday. Of like 60-70% for Tillman here. So I really like going the double center route this on DraftKings. And I think that given the fact that you have a power forward spot for both of these guys, you should be playing at least one of them. Agreed that it will be Tillman too, because I think we haven't necessarily, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, Jackson could have 50 FanDuel points today, but he certainly hasn't necessarily put it all together quite yet.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anything else here in this game? If not, let's move over to pick'em stuff, talk about some Tillman numbers and maybe even some Luca numbers as well.
The last piece that I want to at least mention here is what happens if Kyrie plays? Is it just Luca?
It's just Luca, nothing else. Just Luca.
Okay. Do we know if he went through shoot around this morning?
We do not. I
I haven't seen
I don't know.
anything, so
I haven't seen anything either. I can definitely look for it, but it'll probably be after we get off the show.
I mean, it is kind of strange that they announced this as late as they did, right?
Yeah,
They
it
could have come
definitely
out
is.
a couple days ago and said he's dealing with this.
Yeah, it probably should have came out. I mean, the last time they played was what, like Friday? Is that? Yeah, last time they played is Friday. So if they're coming out with it this late, might have been a practice injury, might have been something else, and it's never good to come out with late news. Late news usually decreases your likelihood of playing, unless you're OG and a newbie, then you're just fine. But if for Kyrie, it's going to be. I would lean on the side of doubtful rather than questionable.
Yeah, one last thing. If Kyrie plays, wouldn't you think we don't have any like data necessarily that's super telling on this, but it is Marcus Smart taking on Kyrie and the not that there was beef there, but there's definitely like he guarded him every day at practice kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there might be beef. I mean, he hated that Celtics team. He said a lot of negative things in the press about this Celtics team. So there definitely
Yeah.
could be beef there for sure. That'd
Yeah.
be fun to watch. All right. Anything else? If not, let's talk about Pick'em.
No, let's talk about Pick'em here. I'd be curious. I have not looked at this today, and I will say that if Luca has under 31 points, we're taking it.
Luca does not have numbers up because we don't know Kyrie news.
Oh, well, I have it, but I think if I
Oh, good.
refresh my page, I think if I refresh my page, I'll lose it. So,
Yeah, I
um,
imagine so. What are the
it
numbers
was
before the
31 and a
Kyrie news?
half.
Pretty high. But I mean, I've been the guy who's been hating on the Luca stuff all season long, and he covers it with ease. So I think this could potentially be another spot where he does really well. But I'd be fine with taking anything.
Oh, yeah,
I
this is over now. It's 34 and a half now.
Oh my lord. Yeah, no thanks. I'll stay away. But
Yeah.
fun to watch. Fun to play him in DFS to at least get our sweat somewhere. Really like Tillman, 20 and a half or yeah, 20.5 points and rebounds. Really, really like that number. I think double double is not a for sure thing, but definitely possible. And he could be able to grab 10 plus boards or like 12 plus boards today. So I really like 20 and a half.
If there was any Tim Hardaway, obviously they won't add that probably until the Kyrie stuff is announced, which by the way, Underdog still has Kyrie up on the board. It's just Luca's numbers went through the roof because of the news. But yeah, I like the Tillman stuff. I think points rebounds is fine. I think rebounds by itself is fine. I like the Tillman stuff, and I know it didn't hit necessarily the last time, but I would be interested in any Jaren Jackson rebounds plus block steals. It's actually at 2.5 today.
Yeah, I could definitely get behind. That's a pretty low number. I could definitely get behind that. Anything else here? If not, let's keep it moving. Talk about this next game.
No, I mean, if there was one game that you could stack today, I think it would be that one.
For sure. All right. Next game up is going to end up being the Utah Jazz facing off against the Denver Nuggets. Currently, Nuggets come in as 8.5 point favorites. Over-unders at 227.5. Let's talk about this Utah side first. I just don't really have any interest in this team, to be honest with you. I'm curious to hear if you differ here, but I don't know. Tough environment, tough matchup. Denver's just been really, really good, and I don't know. Nothing breaks through for me. But does anything jump off the page for you for Utah?
Not really. Tough environment to play in. Denver doesn't really have any injuries that we need to talk about. And I think, the biggest thing that I always look at is like, is Joker too expensive? You're obviously playing Luka in this situation tonight. And I do think that Denver has the capability to kind of mop the floor. And I still think Utah's a solid squad, but I just don't think that they match up anywhere well with this spot. But if there was one spot that could be really, really enticing, it would be playing Joker over Doncic in tournaments. And I think that that's probably the most leverage you're going to get on this slate in this game.
You do end up doing that. You've got to play a Utah Jazz piece. I think you end up playing a guy like Laurie Markkinen. You got to play someone in hopes this game stays close because I think you could really be in a situation where Denver ends up blowing things out. And in that case, Jokic just doesn't get there. So like correlation
Yeah.
wise, run it back with Laurie, run it back with Jordan Clarkson. Even I think there's plenty of options there that are good run back situations. But that's about as far as I would take it. I would only do GPP stacks of this game, and that's it.
It's a very big stay away in cash because there's only one total injury on this entire game.
For sure. All right. Let's talk about some pick'em stuff. Anything here that interests you?
Joker triple doubles, but it's not like you can't even call it a cash play because it's not, and you're parlaying the plays anyway. But that would be an interesting thing. It's a scorcher right now, an underdog getting a triple double tonight. Other than that, man, there's no real reason to go to this game at all. Just honestly, if you want to sweat Joker, I would suggest doing it tonight.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Ready to move on to the last game?
Yeah.
All right. Next game up or last game up is going to be the Orlando Magic facing off against the LA Lakers. Currently, this comes in with the Lakers being 2 point favorites at home over under. One of the most uninspiring over unders at the day at 218.5. Let's talk about this Magic team first. I think this Lakers team is just living up to their defensive potential right now, and it's going to be hard to take anyone against this team and feel really good about it. I guess if I were going to take someone, it would probably be Paulo, just in hopes that consistent shot taking is something that will help him out here. But it's not even like he's had consistent shot taking to start out the season. So um, I don't know what jumps off the page for you for this Orlando team, because for me it just falls back into the same category where we talked about the Celtics, we talked about the Pelicans, the Hawks, the Timberwolves. Like fully healthy teams are really hard to go to on this slate, and it's not like you have a whole bunch of injuries to go off of. It's just like it's just a lot of variance built in.
Yeah. So I think there is I don't know. I think the number one thing that stood off the page to me was the fact that they are only a 2 point underdog. The Magic are, which I think gives huge props to them as a team. It's just tough to kind of get anywhere. Like you have multiple guards fighting with you for usage here, and the big men are going to be in a tough matchup. Maybe this is like I don't want to do it, but at tournaments, like you might be able to take a risk on one of the guards. But this feels like the classic super head scratch play of the day where everybody goes to Paulo Banchero because he's underpriced on FanDuel. And we've seen it twice this year. Every single time they've played, he's had ownership. And it's a late night situation where the game is an hour and a half later than everything else against the Lakers. I could easily see Paulo Banchero being owned on FanDuel. And that is just such a criminal decision. I don't, we're not going to do it, obviously, but I'm just saying, don't be surprised to see him 25-30% owned. Ben Simmons is a much better play at the same price tag. Tillman is $100 cheaper. And if they make that decision, Josh, I think that we'll feel pretty good about our chances.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think there's anything that sticks out on either side of the ball. Watch out for Lakers news. Maybe after the overtime game last night, they end up sitting some of the old heads like LeBron or something. But that's not news that we'll get now. It's probably news that we'll get in a couple hours if they're questionable or anything. And if that's the case, then we'll react then. But it's hard to react to right now, given the current status of this team.
Do you do you roster any not anybody? Do you leave enough money or just play D'Angelo Russell? Because number one, I think the spot's okay. Number two, if they arrest somebody, he would be an immediate impact player. I don't think he's a rest candidate. And then number three, are you just waiting? Can you or should you wait till 10:30 to have that kind of salary sitting around?
I don't think you should, to be honest with you. I just
I
think it
think he's
makes
been
all
the
your
most consistent player on the team so far. That's kind of weird to say, isn't it, for fantasy?
that is weird to say. Don't hurt my feelings, please. But yeah,
I
no, I
mean,
would
it
agree
is
that
though.
he's. You're right. He definitely has been. So like, I understand the sentiment and I understand the take. It's just, um, I don't know. I feel like he just had better spots today that end up filling that hole. And again, like we go back to the conversation of like if you're playing Dame, Luca, and Duran is kind of like your core three that you really want to build off of. Anyone above like 5,500 makes that build a lot tougher than it needs to be. And again, I haven't fitted in all the value pieces. I'm just looking. If you put in Dame, Luca, and Duran into your FanDuel lineup right now, you have 4,900 left over for your remaining salary per player. Meaning that like a 6K guy, a 7K guy just throws things completely off kilter unless you're like have punting value, which I mean, you have some good value today. You don't have punting value though, that's for sure. You don't have like those 3K guys that you can feel really comfortable with today. I think value wise overall, there's definitely guys out there like names are blanking me right now, of course. The Carusos of the world, the Nets players that give you some pretty good value. Um, I don't know. What other value pieces would you say are out there that you feel really good about today?
Josh Green.
But that's if Dallas ends up
I know.
sitting
So, but
Kyrie.
my,
So, like,
are you gonna? Are you? I'll let you finish, and then I'll kind of transition into my closing thoughts there.
no, I mean I'm done. I mean the question was posed to you. Like I guess it's just a wait and see type of slate where we've got to get more injury news to feel good about anything.
Right. So earlier in the show, I said this was like the first slate all week that we have not had early window news influence decisions, and so I think the slate in general, and this is why I think that we have an edge always, especially on a Monday Night Football night where this game, like, I think the most
Yeah.
important window and how
Ooh.
you approach building things is waiting to 8 p.m. and then you can move on with your day. I think that you prepare yourself for the 8 p.m. window, and football's going to be locking right around the same time. So I think people will be distracted. Halloween's got stuff going on. So I know it's not that, but you get my point. I think it's the slate is built around this 8 p.m. window, and you need to wait for things. And it's going to be a pivot after lock, most certainly tonight, probably 95% sure on that.
Yeah, I think that there probably will be some pivots. We're waiting on so much news, and so much of that news isn't at the 7 p.m. window that like locks feel or pivots feel like they're definitely going to happen. So it's a good
Yep.
slate. It's we love doing this podcast for free, but a big reason why we're able to do it for free and do it so early is because NBA is such an injury dependent. It's such an injury dependent sport that like yes, we give you. I think we give you guys a ton of value by doing this free on here on everywhere that we do it. But we there's also a ton of value still going to members when we're able to break down stuff for them live. And I think Read and React's gone really well. And I think we've been handling injury news really well to start out the season.
Think so as well. Final thoughts on this, kind of piggybacking off what we just talked about. This 7 p.m. window now turns into something that's quite volatile. I think that you can still play some of the plays that we've already listed. Uh, but if you roster players in this game, know that you cannot change them after they lock. And that could be a hindrance to the entire slate. It could also be a hindrance if the news breaks the wrong way after lock. So it's a weird conundrum to be in.
For sure. Definitely. All right, Jared, any other final thoughts? If not, we're going to get out of here, man.
Nope, let's get out of here.
let's get out of here. Make sure to look out for Monday Night Football content. Jared's going to be handling that in its entirety, and make sure to look out for NBA content, which comes out in about 3.5 hours. So thank you all for listening, as always. And as always, my name is Joshua Riemer. Good night and good skill.